but it goes deeper. And I want to be very clear as I'm getting these new names involved with this investigation. I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm not saying they've done anything wrong. All I'm doing as an independent journalist and investigator is connecting dots and asking questions. So I just want to go on record that I'm not accusing any of these people of wrongdoing.
This does involve Russia, and the narrative has been all along Russia, Russia, Russia.
On breaking new details now in the growing scandal surrounding the Clinton campaign, we are now learning of a potential quid pro quo between Russia and the State Department, with Hillary Clinton at the center of it all. Follow us here. It gets complicated.
Exhibit A for Mrs. Clinton, uranium. You know, the stuff we use for nuclear energy and bombs. You might imagine it's a hot commodity. And guess who has a fair amount of it? We do.
Dozens of armed federal officers are preparing for a showdown with a Nevada cattle rancher regarded by some as an outlaw, a hero by others.
Now to that mysterious death in Miami, a federal prosecutor's body found on Hollywood Beach, raising a lot of questions.
After a battle, Woods and friendly Libyan fighters regain control of the consulate and start searching for Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith.
After a new report suggests she may have helped advance Russian espionage.
And agents from several federal agencies have surrounded a 600,000-acre section of public land and are preparing to move against rancher Cliven Bundy.
Another man connected to the DNC is found dead less than a month after the murder of DNC staffer Seth Conrad Rich.
This summer called Jade Helm 15. While the military says it's just training soldiers for the realities of war.
Earlier this year, an IT staffer who worked for former DNC chairperson Debbie Wasserman Schultz became the subject of an investigation.
Yeah. One of the first instances, Russia...
whose cattle have been grazing illegally, they say, for the past 20 years. George Knapp of the I-Team visited the Bundy Ranch this week and has that story.
This is the freedom that we have in America right here. This is we're going to have our freedom inside of that fence there.
Bunkerville rancher Cliven Bundy thinks the federal government has gone too far in preparing to round up his cattle. Example, this is one of 2 designated spots where the public will be allowed to protest the roundup. A sign inside the fence shows how some people feel about a First Amendment zone. And during our tour with Bundy, a passerby stopped to offer encouragement.
I'm one of your neighbors. I get to look at that every day in my life. Hang in there.
Okay, thank you.
Miles away, just off the interstate, another fenced area is where media are allowed. Armed agents in trucks form a wall to prevent anyone from approaching what resembles a military staging area, the heart of the Bundy Roundup operation. More rangers sit at every road leading into the 600,000-acre Gold Butte area to prevent the general public from coming in.
With all of these rangers and all this force that's out here, they're only after one man right now. Who do you think they're after? They're after Cliven Bundy. Whether they want to incarcerate me or whether they want me to shoot me in the back, they're after me. But that's not all that's at stake here. Your liberty and freedoms are at stake.
Bundy's had a long time to sharpen his message. The fight has been building since 1993, when BLM changed grazing rules for Gold Butte to protect the endangered desert tortoise. Bundy refused to go along and stopped paying his fees altogether. Since then, the BLM and federal courts have ordered him to stop letting his cattle roam through Gold Butte, and he's ignored the orders because he doesn't recognize federal authority over the land.
All those DNC email, right? Well, now there's a story up on foxnews.com. Remember that DNC staff member by the name of Seth Rich, who, there he is right there.
Well, the unsolved murder of Seth Rich has gone viral, and this is a story that is not dying but continues to grow legs despite what the liberal mainstream media and the Democrat Party would like to see with this story, and that is the complete squashing of any coverage of this at all. So here's what I'm going to try to do. Basically, my investigation into this over the course of the last 5 days, basically I look like a mad scientist on a board with a bunch of pictures and stories and a bunch of lines being drawn in between them. So I'm not going to try to inundate all of that into the coverage here tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to point out facts, and I'm going to point out the missing links in this investigation that need to be put out there immediately Otherwise, this story is going to continue to get bigger, and the mystery that is the unsolved murder of Seth Rich is going to continue to get more legs. And it has been mostly, from my experience, up to us, independent investigators, to get these answers, because we're not getting anything from the D.C. police, nothing from the FBI, and nothing from the hospital or the people that treated Seth Rich, all of which is not normal. You would think with a story of so much coverage and so much importance that they would want to squash any rumors or any false narratives about it by putting this information out there, but they're not doing it. So let me just give you a summary of the facts that I have right now and the questions that need to be answered, at least in my mind. I'm not going to get to everything because some things cannot be verified, and I don't want to report on them yet, but we can verify some things, which leaves a lot of questions. But let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the whole beginning of this and what might actually be going on. What is the motive? Well, folks,
the bottom line here is it comes down to tens of millions of dollars donated to the Clinton Foundation and millions of dollars in speaking fees to former President Bill Clinton from foreign governments and businesses that had business or policy issues that would somehow end up in front of Secretary of State Clinton.
Thanks to a deal approved in part by Mrs. Clinton's State Department, we no longer control at least 1/5 of our capacity, perhaps more. Instead, the Russians do. That's uranium inside the United States, and its new owner is a Russian company called Uranium One that's owned by Russia's nuclear agency.
Michael, this is looking like the Clintons have designs of becoming the most corrupt family in American politics.
I won't embrace that notion, Lou. However, when I picked up the paper this morning, I was absolutely astonished, and it wasn't in the Washington Times or some arguably right-wing paper. The New York Times broke the story. Apparently, it arose out of a Hoover Institution report, but it was devastating.
And then we find out, because the Canadian government requires reporting, we find out the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, from 2009 to 2012, over that period of time, the Russian takeover of a company, Uranium One, that based in Toronto, that has control of 1/5 of the United States uranium deposits. She signed off on, CFIUS signed off on. This is an administration that just turned over a strategically critical operation to the Russian government operating a shell company.
Now, this is a lawsuit that is mainly being served by Bernie Sanders supporters represented in 45 different states. And these are Bernie Sanders supporters who, well, I guess they read the Wikileaks or saw the superdelegates or the way the Democrats ran the campaign. Well, they wanted Bernie to get in, but they never saw that he got a fair shot. See, the Democrats, they rigged the election for Hillary Clinton. And Bernie Sanders either unknowingly screwed himself by running as a Democrat or perhaps was playing into the Democrat plan to put Hillary up there to begin with. But that's neither here nor there. So Bernie Sanders supporters who gave a lot of money to the DNC, a lot of people gave a lot of money to the DNC because they hoped that Bernie Sanders would get elected. And even though he was clearly more popular than Hillary Clinton during the rallies and a lot of these primaries, well, Hillary Clinton still came out on top because she had the superdelegates. But there was some foul play involved. And this came out via the WikiLeaks with leaked questions to media collusion, again, the superdelegates, and more so than what we even know was probably going on. And this is where Seth Rich comes into play. You see, Seth Rich was not just a regular Democrat staffer. He was with the IT department, especially when it came to logging voter rolls and voter outreach. So Seth Rich not just had the IT skills and the technical skills to kind of amass a great knowledge of what the Democrat voter base was thinking and wanting in the last election cycle, but also he knew the numbers because he was the one that was working with it. That's a lot of important intel. And when he found out that the Democrats were going to put Hillary Clinton up there instead of Bernie Sanders, despite the overwhelming support of Bernie Sanders and all the money that came in from just grassroots Democrats, that they were still going to give it to Hillary. Well, Seth Rich didn't really like that. Now, he's been doing some other things with Kim.com and then apparently had a pseudonym named Panda, trying to work with the Internet Party. But that's still not here nor there. What we're talking about is Seth Rich knowing things about the Democrat Party, specifically with voting numbers and why Hillary Clinton won the Democrat nomination and not Bernie Sanders. So that's just one angle that brings about this lawsuit against the DNC.
It was a celebratory day for Sean Lucas when he entered the DNC building last month and told a committee official, "You've been served." Lucas worked as a process server for the class action DNC lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed against both the committee and former DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz for allegedly committing acts of fraud after leaked emails revealed the DNC showed favoritism towards Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. After serving the papers, Lucas told an independent filmmaker who captured the whole thing on video that although Schultz refused to meet with him, democracy was served.
Yeah, they wouldn't give us any of the head honchos, which I kind of had a feeling wasn't going to happen. But we did make contact with somebody from the Democratic National Committee's office, and they've been served. Democracy has prevailed today.
But in a bizarre twist of events, on August 2nd, less than 1 month after serving the subpoena, Lucas was reported dead. According to police records, Lucas's girlfriend found him lying on the floor unresponsive when she returned home that evening and immediately called 911.
All right, we've got some breaking news now. Let's go back to William Longinez in Bunkerville, Nevada, with developments in that standoff between a rancher and the federal government. William, what can you tell us?
Uma, we have just received word from the director of the Federal Bureau of Land Management that this operation is over. The operation to seize the cattle and enforce a court order against rancher Cliven Bundy is over. The BLM is pulling out. And I am quoting, "Based on information on the ground, we have made the decision to conclude this operation out of concern for the safety of the employees and the public." That means it's over, and they'll be pulling out over the next day or two. Back to you.
So the tensions can be diffused quickly. Thank you very much, William, for that update.
And a large-scale military exercise held by the U.S. Army called Jade Helm 15 is launching today. It will involve thousands of military men across 7 states. Some trainings even involve the special ops blending in with civilians. And as Alexei Yarshevsky reports, lack of information on such operations has caused a bit of paranoia among local residents.
It was very different at the Bundy Ranch because they had the support of the entire community. They were very media savvy about the way they were going
to.
The
community had been screwed over. 34 of the 35 families since the 1870s had been run out. They were shooting people on bicycles in the back. People were fed up.
It was actually more than 50 ranchers that had been run out of there, Alex. And Cliven Bundy was the last rancher there. And, of course, very similar situation here, from what I understand. The Hammonds were about the last ranchers that were here. The BLM wants their land, and it's kind of checkerboarded with some other area that the BLM asserts control over. So I understand that commonality there, and we need to get back to those issues. This has become a side issue. It's become a distraction.
Fox News obtaining new video of the mess left behind after the standoff between federal agents and protesters at the Bundy Cattle Ranch in Nevada. William Lajeunesse is just back from the ranch. William?
Well, the root of the dispute, of course, is the desert tortoise. A federal court gave the BLM authority to seize and impound Bundy's cattle to protect the tortoise. But the order did not say the agency could, as this video shows, destroy his water tanks, water lines, and fences. Bundy also blames the BLM for allegedly killing 2 prize bulls.
If you notice, I'm inside this pen where that bull was shot. And if you look along the inside of this pen, there's nothing where this pen has been bent. If you look on the ground, the post is still in the same spot. It hasn't even moved. It's not like the bull was smashing this pen and trying to attack the people or anything. The pen is sitting here, hasn't moved. No damage whatsoever. Where was the danger in that bull?
BLM wranglers allegedly shot the bulls because they were dangerous and could gore their horses. Bundy's friends say that the white bull was shot 5 times.
Nowhere in the court order that I saw does it say that they can destroy infrastructure, destroy corrals, tanks, desert environment.
shoot cattle.
Now, the BLM said this afternoon these are federal lands and they don't need permission to destroy illegal fences, water lines, etc.
This does involve Russia, and the narrative has been all along Russia, Russia, Russia.
Yeah. I didn't do anything for Russia. I've done nothing for Russia. Hillary Clinton gave him 20% of our uranium. Hillary Clinton did a reset. Remember, with the stupid plastic button that made us all look like a bunch of jerks? Here, take a look. He looked at her like, what the hell is she doing with that cheap plastic button?
Much more straight ahead as we take up the assaults on the Trump presidency. It's that straightforward. Explosive new developments tonight in the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich, who was murdered last summer. A federal investigator telling Fox News that an FBI forensic report of Rich's computer showed he made contact with Wikileaks through a former reporter and London-based Wikileaks director, Gavin McFadden. The investigator told Fox News Rich provided McFadden with more than 44,000 emails, nearly 18,000 attachments. Rich was murdered near his D.C. home on the morning of July 10th. But his wallet, his cell phone, his watch not taken. WikiLeaks 12 days later published internal emails showing top DNC officials trading ideas on how to hurt Senator Bernie Sanders at the polls, and those emails resulting in the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the chair of the DNC, and the DNC's 3 top officials because of the obvious conclusion portrayed in those emails between the DNC and the Clinton campaign. Rich's contact with WikiLeaks, corroborated by private investigator and former D.C. detective Rod Wheeler, who was hired by a third party to investigate this case. A Rich family spokesman claiming the report is unsubstantiating and added, quote, "Even if tomorrow an email was found, it is not a high enough bar of evidence to prove any interactions, as emails can be altered, and we've seen that those interested in pushing conspiracies will stop at nothing to do so." Those are the words of the family spokesperson, who is also a Democratic crisis management and public relations expert.
Back with the Fox News alert, a brand new bombshell in the murder of that guy right there, a DNC staffer. An investigator now says Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks.
Not only that, he claims there's been a law enforcement cover-up.
Well, Griff Jenkins live in Washington with these breathtaking, breaking developments. Griff.
Brian Ainsley and Steve, good morning. Breaking indeed and developing at a rapid pace. Bombshell new evidence of a former DNC staffer you just showed there, Seth Rich, suggests he was in communications with WikiLeaks prior to his murder last summer. Let me take you back. Here in the nation's capital, it was last July. DNC staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed on the way home from a bar in a trendy Northwest neighborhood here. Police initially saying that they believed it was a botched robbery, but questions remain with the investigation still open. Now, a year later, according to a parallel investigation by former D.C. police homicide detective and Fox News contributor Rod Wheeler, there's evidence that Rich had contact with WikiLeaks. That evidence on a laptop belonging to Seth Rich, showing he was talking with WikiLeaks. Wheeler says this smells like a cover-up.
Military exercises and drills are not something uncommon, whether it's in the United States or anywhere across the world. But it's not every time that such exercises become a reason for public paranoia and even protest movements. Now, a large-scale military drill called Jade Helm 15 is launching today in 7 states, including Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and Utah. The main mission of the exercise is to train the so-called unconventional warfare in deserted and remote areas, to train soldiers how to operate in difficult conditions.
The FBI has set up checkpoints along key routes in and out of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. That's where a weeks-long standoff between armed occupiers of federal land and authorities may be winding down. Earlier, CNN affiliate KTXV was nearby as an FBI agent tried to negotiate with a militia member inside that park compound.
we can have, if the discussion can continue, but right now we need to focus on getting everyone off the
Then why did you cut off communications? Ammon was communicating with you, and you didn't want to communicate with press present. Why did you cut off communication?
I want to find out who caused that man's death so we can put them behind bars. But if there's somebody in politics, if there's somebody in government, whether it's in the mayor's office or anywhere else in the city that's involved, you better believe they're going to be dragged in and questioned.
Wheeler sources inside the police department also saying that they were told to stand down on the case. Police not confirming any of this with us. I've been calling the PIO number here at the D.C. Police Department. That was at 6 a.m. and I have contacts from private crime stories. Nobody telling me anything. We are going to keep hunting this. It's worth noting, guys, at the time of Rich's death, his wallet was not taken, and he actually went to the hospital. He was still alive at the hospital where he died. We know nothing about what may have transpired between police investigators and Rich, but obviously Rod Wheeler looking into it. I've known Rod for a long time, and I know he's been looking into this case for a long time in a parallel investigation. This is simply developing, guys, and we will have more on it later.
So why would the U.S. allow Russia to take control of so much American uranium? Good question. And some lawmakers asked it and objected to this deal at the time, saying, why would we do this? But in June of 2010, the Obama administration signed off. Not just Mrs. Clinton, but it included her. It was a committee that includes the Attorney General, the Secretaries of Treasury, Defense, Homeland Security, Commerce and Energy, and, of course, the Secretary of State. That same month, Bill Clinton suddenly received a $500,000 speaking gig in Moscow by a Russian bank that wanted this deal and badly. And the company that took control of so much of America's uranium, well, they were big Clinton fans, donating at least $2.35 million to the Clinton Global Initiative from 2009 to 2012. Donations, as it turns out, the Clinton charity did not disclose. In fact, the donations were only unearthed after Clinton cash author Peter Schweitzer dug up tax records of a foreign foundation up in Canada that happened to show these payments to the Clinton charity. And in the end, with the deal signed off on by Secretary Clinton, we are looking at real questions.
But remember, Bundy doesn't even recognize federal authority. The government says he owes some $640 million in damages, and if he failed to pay, they would sell his cattle. Only we discovered a big problem. No one in Nevada would touch Bundy's cattle for fear of being blacklisted.
The sale yards are very nervous about taking these, what has in the past been basically stolen cattle from the federal government.
Documents show BLM paid a Utah wrangler $966,000, almost $1 million, to collect Bundy's cattle, and reportedly $300,000 for a Utah auctioneer to sell them. What they didn't plan for is a letter from the governor of Utah saying that Bundy's cattle could not be shipped or sold in Utah. So, Megan, on Saturday, the BLM is stuck with cattle that it could not sell, despite already spending millions of dollars in an operation that didn't work. This is not over. The BLM says it will try to resolve the dispute administratively and judicially, though Bundy does not recognize their rights.
My forefathers have been up and down the Virgin Valley here ever since 1877. All of these rights that I claim have been created through preemptive rights and beneficial use of the forage in the water. I have been here longer, and my rights are all older than BLM even existed.
The Bundy family was already ranching here long before the Department of Interior was born and long before tortoises were protected. But federal courts say he doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. BLM has long sidestepped the fight, in part because of concerns what might happen if it tried to round up his 500 or so cattle that even now are grazing on forbidden public lands. Bundy says he's always been willing to pay fees, but not if it helps to cut his own throat.
I don't have no problem with that. I've tried to pay it to Nevada State, Clark County, and they've got some of my money in their coffers right now from but I'm not going to pay my money to the wrong landlord, and I'm not going to pay my money to BLM to manage me out of business. The federal government has seized Nevada's sovereignty, Nevada statehood. They've seized Nevada laws, and they've seized our public land. We have no access to our public land.
Critics say Bundy's being arrogant and that his cattle have caused irreparable harm to Gold Butte's fragile environment. Environmentalists forced BLM's hand by threatening to sue in federal court. The Bureau will pay nearly $1 million to a private contractor to round up Bundy's cows. But with dozens of government agents positioned all around the area for what might take weeks or months, the true cost could be much higher. Bundy's cowhands have time to kill these days because they're prohibited from heading out to work their cattle. And soon enough, there could be no cattle left. The BLM plans to sell off Bundy's herd. Bundy stopped short of saying how far he's willing to take it.
Well, I've fought this thing legally. I've fought it politically. I've fought it through the media. And I will fight it on the ground if I have to.
George Knapp, 8 News Now.
The I-Team has been asking to speak with Cliven Bundy for more than 2 years. He told us that while he agreed to speak to other media, he intended to save us until the end, and that could come soon. The BLM won't say exactly when the roundup will begin, but could happen as soon as...
It's estimated that in Texas alone, more than 1,200 military men will take part in this exercise. There will be different sorts of trainings, including nightly helicopter extraction, hostage takeovers, and even a role play modeled after the French resistance to Nazi occupation during the World War II. The level of realism sought by the planners of this exercise is so high that it's unclear now whether the troops will actually try to blend in with civilians during this training. According to a PowerPoint presentation prepared by the military organizers, some of the Jade Helm 15 participants may conduct suspicious activities, I quote, and part of their trainings and others will be wearing civilian attire and driving civilian vehicles. In several instances, the Army even asked for public facilities or abandoned, let's say, hospitals to be presented to them for this exercise. But all in all, information about this particular drill is very scarce. Not a lot is known about where and how the training will be actually conducted, and this has become the reason for unease among people living in the areas. In particular, the InfoWars website recently reported that the acronym for the HELM could be the Homeland Eradication of Local Militants.
And one more thing on the logo. Who made up the subtitle Master of the Human Domain, and what does that mean?
So Master of the Human Domain is a construct that we operate in. It's actually the human domain. It's recognized at the Army level, and what that is there is no longer a linear battlefield after 14 years. So if you think that there's going to be another great war where it's the Allies against the Axis, or even the American-led efforts against the North Koreans and the Chinese, that's just not how warfare is conducted anymore. It's asymmetric in nature. And what is at the root or vied for by the enemy is the human populace. You have a gentleman in the Middle East, we'll call him Abdullah Ali. Okay, so Abdullah Ali is able to provide you food when you can't get food. He's able to get you clean water when you can't get clean water. He's able to start up a school in your local community. And then one day, Abdullah Ali comes to you and says, hey, would you mind hiding this anti-aircraft missile for me? He's never asked that population for anything before, but he has only provided. He has worked the human domain. They take the anti-aircraft missile and they hide it for him. It is population centers. How do we counter his credibility, his influence that he has when we come in and we move into an area for 3 days, 4 days at a time? How can you instantly pick that apart and figure it out? That is the human domain that we operate in.
I appreciate that explanation. Very well done. And our next question from the floor.
Yeah, I'm Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, U.S. Army, retired, Infowars.com. And I have a question. You said your training will be to blend in for overseas combat missions. So I'm kind of curious how these special operations guys who look like us, look like him, are going to be practicing blending in when we all look the same. Don't they need to train in an area overseas for the combat they're going to go to? Because that, quite frankly, doesn't make sense to me from my time in the military, because you guys have Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia, the Asymmetric Warfare Center, that has a school, a soccer field, a subway station, a bank, all that, and you're training on these environments, which look like here. That's why people are concerned.
Excellent question. Do you have an answer?
So with that, realistic military training occurs off of the federal installation out in the local area. That's what we're doing. As far as blending in, yeah, you take a guy from Fayetteville, North Carolina, I dress differently than people dress here. It's regional. It's one of the...
I've been at Fort Bragg. I was there for 7 years.
You may not like my answer, but that is how it is. And you may have been at Fort Bragg and people dress differently in and around the 10 surrounding counties, and you've seen it. In the 10 surrounding counties, people dress differently, and you've seen how soldiers dress. And you can snicker about it all you want, but that is the truth.
This latest development comes on the heels of a violent arrest that went down last night as militia leader Ammon Bundy and 4 of his supporters were arrested during a traffic stop. Details of the confrontation are unclear at this point, but we do know one man is dead. That would be Occupation spokesman Robert Lavoie Finicum. I spoke with Finicum just a few weeks ago. Listen to what he says.
The first thing that we're taught as kids is do not point guns at people. And so I have no intention in pointing guns at anybody that are not pointing guns at me. So let's just be neighborly. Let's just be kind. Let's be civil. Please don't point guns at me, and I shall not point guns at you. And how about we leave it at that?
The bottom line here is it comes down to tens of millions of dollars donated to the Clinton Foundation and millions of dollars in speaking fees to former President Bill Clinton.
Will you continue to give speeches?
Oh, yeah. I got to pay our bills.
Every ex-president since Eisenhower has gone out and given speeches. The problem is, never did it happen when that ex-president's wife was a powerful senator and later Secretary of State and could do favors for the people paying speaking fees that, by the way, were often inflated speaking fees.
How large?
$500,000, $750,000.
To give a single speech.
To give a single speech, sometimes a 20-minute speech. And these are being paid by interested parties in the third world that want something from his wife, Hillary Clinton, and they usually get it.
Tell me about Frank Giustra.
Frank Giustra is a Canadian billionaire investor in the mining industry who wanted to do business in Kazakhstan in Central Asia. It has one of the largest deposits of uranium in the world. Well, Frank Giustra for years wanted to get lucrative uranium concessions in Kazakhstan, couldn't get them. So he flies with Bill Clinton, his friend, into Kazakhstan. Bill Clinton praises Nazarbayev, the dictator of the country, says he has a wonderful human rights record when he does not. Nazarbayev does what? He gives Bill Clinton's friend, Frank Giustra, a lucrative uranium concession. Several weeks later, what does Frank Giustra do? He writes a $31.3 million check to the Clinton Foundation. That's sort of the down payment. Frank Giustra has given more than $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. But on that uranium deal itself, he's estimated to have made more than $300 million easily. The Clintons helped Frank Giustra get this lucrative uranium concession in Kazakhstan. And what do? They start buying uranium concessions in the United States. And by 2009, somebody looks at this company and says, we want to buy this company. The problem is, Dinesh, who wants to buy the company? The Russian government.
Now, the U.S. federal government has to sign off on it, and Hillary Clinton is the head of the State Department at that time.
8 other investors in Uranium One suddenly decide to write checks to the Clinton Foundation. About $145 million. The federal government looks at it, the State Department signs off on this deal in addition to other government agencies, and the Russian government takes control of significant uranium deposits in the United States.
Which they control now.
Which they control now.
So as to benefit her and her husband's pocketbook by doing favors for foreign governments and foreign countries and then receiving from those persons and countries substantial, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in contributions to the Clinton Foundation / slush fund.
Now, that's not necessarily illegal, but it is highly political, isn't it? That's the point.
It is illegal if her decisions as Secretary of State were influenced by her knowledge or the high probability of her knowledge that the contribution would be coming.
Is that what the FBI is looking at?
Yes, that's exactly what the FBI is looking at. Look, there are some extreme, I'll give you the most extreme example, involves her husband's friend, Frank Giustra, Giustra, a Canadian, who asked Mrs. Clinton as a foreigner for permission to own shares in a uranium mine in Utah. Secretary of State has the permission. She granted the permission. He sold 80% of his shares to Vladimir Putin. The Russians now own this uranium mine in Utah. He then gave $145 million from the proceeds to the Clinton Foundation. Now, you're raising your eyebrows. Anybody's eyebrows would be raised listening to this. Admittedly, I've given you one of the more extreme examples of this. There are many others. This is really perhaps the most incendiary of them.
It's certainly $145 million goes into the Clinton Global Initiative, or the Clinton Fund, whichever the correct name is.
Correct.
And part of that money came out of the proceeds of the sale of a uranium mine in America to Vladimir Putin.
Right. Now, again, not to Putin himself, but to a sovereign entity owned by the Russian government. Absolutely.
Well, it's all the same thing, actually.
In that case, it is, yes. So how can she possibly explain that or justify that kind of judgment? So Trump's argument is this is the mentality that is that is putting herself out for the White House. Do you want this same corrupt mentality as president that we had as Secretary of State?
Some in Texas even go as far as believing that the actual reason for these exercises is to completely militarily take over Texas. The New York Times reported that in several parts of Texas, residents were either burying some of their firearms to hide them, or to the contrary, some farmers rumored to have been buying thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition. But not only the Army officials who are saying that there will be no disruptions to everyday life of citizens across the areas where the exercises are held, but also some of the local officials are saying that this is not a problem at all. One of the mayors in Texas, the mayor of the town of El Dorado, even said that the Army could use his ranch in this military exercise. So strong the level of public concern has been in relation to the Jade Helm 15 military exercise that there's now even a protest movement called Counter Jade Helm, and these guys are looking to follow the military gear and to report to a special website as to how the military exercise is going. We're expecting that Jade Helm will last for at least another 8 weeks. Alexei Rashevsky, RT, reporting from New York City.
First of all, if private landowners came to the military and invited them on their property, why do we need to have this type of a presentation? Why do we need to have the invitation from the Commissioner's Court and also from, like, the City Smithville Council?
So you talked about terrain and distances. Why are you not utilizing on-base sites for these kinds of things? And the last question is for me, why would the public not go out and vote on this? We've talked about that. Okay, so why is this so important to do this off-base?
Again, the realistic military training takes place off the federal installation. We know those installations like the packs of our hands. It's really getting out there and exposing them to new terrain that they're not familiar with, to include even the road networks that they may have to drop on political tests.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Like the gentleman behind the camera.
Oh, thank you. And this gentleman has had his hand up for a long time, so if it would please the court, maybe you can talk next. First of all, sir, can I have you two gentlemen just by camera?
What's your name, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Shakari Jackson, Infowars.com. For the two gentlemen, can you guys just for the camera state your names and positions again?
I'll state my name. I'm the spokesman for the United States Army Special Operations Command. I'm the guy giving the brief.
Yes, sir.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Marco Story, Director of Public Affairs, United States Army Special Operations Command. Right.
Okay. Now we're talking about role players, and you mentioned the role players. I'm curious as to how you guys came about these role players, and also will there be any drills to round up and/or detain the role players?
as far as the role players go, they are going to be service members. And if there's an incident like that, it's going to be within the scope of the exercise for unconventional warfare for future operations overseas.
Will anybody be detained or rounded up in the exercise?
It's possible. It's for future operations overseas. So in the Convention of Unconventional Warfare, all right, there could be a point where it goes kinetic. So, and then you have to execute actions on the objective.
Well, I guess we keep coming back to the same question: how these guys will blend in overseas? I mean,
it all starts with the basics. Okay, we don't just go and say run. You gotta crawl. You gotta walk.
How about this for a coincidence? Weapons stolen from an FBI vehicle in Northeast D.C. This is the same morning that Seth Rich was killed. Seth Rich, actually, I believe it was July 10th. It says July 11th. But I think I haven't actually double checked those times, but I believe that right here they're saying these weapons 6:45 to 7:49 a.m. Seth Rich, I believe, was shot at 5:57 a.m. With what? Stolen handguns? What was stolen from the FBI in Northeast D.C. where Seth Rich was shot? Handguns? Again, though, I'm sure that this is just a coincidence, but you would think that the FBI would have answers on this. They would be able to tell you what type of caliber weapons were stolen and what type of caliber weapons and bullets was used on Seth Rich. No answers there. So there's a missing link that should be easy to answer. Shouldn't even be hard. All right, now let's look at some of these coincidences, folks. These are the new revelations that are being brought to the forefront here. First of all, it's already been said that the D.C. police, it looks like, may be attempting a cover-up. Why would they be doing that? That's right, because Heather Podesta has served on the D.C. Police Board. John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Heather Podesta, D.C. Police Board. I'm sure that's just all a coincidence.
Yeah. In one of the first instances, Russia apparently leaked to WikiLeaks all those DNC email, right? Well, now there's a story up on FoxNews.com. Remember that DNC staff member by the name of Seth Rich, who, there he is right there. He was killed about 10 months ago. It was rumored that he was the source of the emails. I'm sure you've heard that. Well, now, I'm going to just read you the lead line on the FoxNews.com story. The DNC staffer who was gunned down on July 10th on Washington, D.C. street last July, just steps from his home, had leaked thousands of internal email to WikiLeaks, law enforcement sources have told Fox News. So it looks like there's a possibility this is a guy who provided to WikiLeaks all those DNC email.
Then he was shot in the back.
He was shot
in the back, nothing
murdered.
taken from his person. That's just, anyone at the time thought that was bizarre. He happened to work for the DNC, rumored to have had contacts with WikiLeaks, and then he's shot in the back, nobody takes his cell phone, his wallet, just found in the street in Washington, D.C. Rod Wheeler, the investigator who helped break this story with Fox 5 here in Washington, said that he was told by the D.C. police to, quote, basically stand down.
Yeah.
Just stand down. You're not going to get anywhere with this. He maintains that on this computer and Seth Rich's, I believe, relatives, if that's, I think that was what was in the story, that his computer is in the hands of authorities, and that on that computer we will have more definitive information about how he was in touch with WikiLeaks. Then Julian Assange today from WikiLeaks retweeted this report, indicating to a lot of people that he was confirming that in fact Seth Rich was the source of these DNC emails to WikiLeaks, and that he was shot by someone. But
it seems
no
very
suspects.
suspicious. You know what's interesting? That the parents aren't pursuing it.
Well,
they were told it was a robbery.
I don't know what to say about that, but when people don't want information to get out, and when an election is on the line, again, reading between the lines, a lot of people will do a lot of things.
The lawsuit was filed against both the committee and former DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz for allegedly committing acts of fraud after leaked emails revealed the DNC showed favoritism towards Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders.
Earlier this year, an IT staffer who worked for former DNC chairperson Debbie Wasserman Schultz became the subject of an investigation and was banned from the House of Representatives due to suspicion of breaches and security and theft. Now the 4-month investigation by the Capitol Hill Police has taken a new turn. One America's John Hines has that story from Washington.
In a recent video recording of an Appropriations Committee hearing about the Capitol Police budget, it appears as if former DNC chairperson Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz may be threatening the Capitol Police chief for holding a computer as part of an ongoing criminal investigation of Wasserman Schultz's former IT staffer.
With the permission of, through the investigation, and we'll return the equipment. But until that's accomplished, I can't return the equipment.
I think you're violating the rules when you conduct your business that way, and should expect that there would be consequences.
Indeed, there may be consequences for someone, given the state of this ongoing criminal investigation, says Luke Rosiak, who writes about the probe for the Daily Caller News Foundation.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the representative from Florida, revealed that the Capitol Police are holding on to some technology equipment of hers relating to a criminal investigation into her longtime IT aide, a Pakistani guy named Imran Awan. He is suspected of massive breaches of information security and laws and policies surrounding security of members' information. It appears that he was funneling members' data outside of House computers.
And funneling Member of Congress data outside of the House of Representatives' computers appears to be what may have sparked the investigation, with Wasserman Schultz's employee, Mr. Awan, as its focus. But the Daily Caller's Rosiak says when Awan's family members became employed by other Democratic members of Congress, it should have raised questions.
Pretty soon, his relatives started appearing on the payroll of other Democrats. So he had 2 of his brothers both appeared on the payroll. His wife did, his brother's wife did, his best friend did. In all, they collected $4 million since 2010. The thing is, most of those guys were never seen on campus. They appear to be ghost employees.
And none of the 20 or so members of Congress whom these people work for have complained or commented due to the nature of what they point out is an ongoing investigation. Rosiak also notes that House Speaker Paul Ryan has said the Capitol Police have now begun working with outside agencies in this ongoing probe. John Hines, One America News, Washington.
I want to begin by saying thank you to all of you across the country who have volunteered your time, donated what you could, signed up at HillaryClinton.com. You have voted to make Hillary Clinton the nominee of the Democratic Party. This is your victory. And to everyone who supported Senator Sanders, this is your victory too. I've known Bernie since I was a young staffer for Senator Pat Leahy, and he was mayor of Burlington. He stood up to the special interests and fought to give working people a fairer economy and a bigger say. And those are the same values that he brought to this campaign, and our party and our country are better for it. Donald Trump has different values. He built his career by ripping people off, stiffing contractors, and skipping out on his bills through bankruptcy. He is too erratic, dangerous, and divisive to trust to the White House. You know, I'm a fortunate grandson of Italian and Greek immigrants with a blue-collar dad and a pink-collar mom. I've had the honor to serve 2 great presidents.
and it should also be clarified, they're not trying to, they shouldn't be presumed or presented as freeloaders. The money stays in their county and in their state. They're all for their fair share.
They're upholding, see, like for myself, in lieu of what I used to pay to a grazing fee, I'm asking the county commissioners to put in a production tax so I can support the local government.
But the county government doesn't seem like it wants this land.
No, they want the money. Where does the money come from, my man? It comes from Washington down to their little hand.
Right, but what indication have you given?
After a new report suggests she may have helped advance Russian espionage. It began in 2010 as part of a reset of U.S.-Russian relations that included a nuclear weapons treaty. President Obama said then-Secretary of State Clinton would direct the exchange, along with her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov.
I think it's great that Russia is looking to try to create that kind of center for technology and growth right outside Moscow, and we want to help because we think that it's in everyone's interest to do so.
According to leaked diplomatic cables, Russia had actively been looking for U.S. private and governmental assistance with a project dubbed Skolkovo, a Russian equivalent of Silicon Valley. A message from the U.S. ambassador to Russia in February of 2009 showed that Russia wanted concrete results, such as exchanging technology and creating joint ventures with the United States. A cable from November of 2009 said that Russia had everything in place to create the technology hub and only needed investment. That investment came in the following months, as Cisco Systems pledged $1 billion to go towards the development of the massive complex, with the company's vice president saying it represented a good opportunity.
What is encouraging for us as a global company is the top-down commitment that we see from the President Medvedev down.
Google and Intel were quick to follow. In time, the new research facility developed further, with the Russian government promising American firms special access to Russian projects and special tax status. The State Department also heavily encouraged companies to participate, and many of those involved had close connections to Clinton. The co-chair of a group working on investments was Robert Hormats, a close friend, donor, and advisor to Clinton, while yet another official served on Clinton's finance committee during her 2008 campaign. Many of the corporations involved in the project also had ties to the Clintons. A 2012 report identifying key partners found that of 28 partners, 17 had donated to the Clinton Foundation or paid for speeches. It is unknown exactly how much was donated by these corporations to the foundation, but disclosures say it is anywhere from $6.5 to $23 million. Many of the Russian officials involved in the project are also recorded as making donations to the Clinton Foundation. In time, the U.S. government's position on the Russian project soured. In 2014, the FBI raised red flags about Skolkovo, warning companies the tech center could lead to Russians trying to access sensitive and classified research. That same year, the U.S. Army and FBI said they believed the project had helped advance Russia's military technology, and U.S. corporations could unwittingly help in corporate espionage. Analysts say one of the biggest concerns is that Russia could obtain and use nanotechnology against the United States. Key figures involved with Skolkovo claim allegations of spying are false and say all the project's operations are transparent. But as Clinton continues on the campaign trail, this latest report continues to cast doubts on Clinton's time at the State Department. Nicholas Kelgart, One America News.
Now tonight's installment of our look at how the Clinton finances, the Clinton Foundation, and the Clintons' ambitions often intersect. Few stories have generated more controversy than the reports the Clintons facilitated a deal to give Russia control of American uranium. The reporters themselves have actually been assailed, including Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Jo Becker, who we have interviewed several times on her work. Becker has stood by her story amid withering criticism from the Clinton campaign.
Foreigners cannot donate to a presidential campaign. That's meant to limit the influence of foreign governments and foreigners on our political process. But they can legally donate to charitable foundations like the Clinton Foundation.
Billionaire businessman Frank Giustra, a Canadian, is a friend of the Clintons and a large donor to their foundation. And he had an interest in uranium mines located in Kazakhstan.
Bill Clinton has a public press conference with President Nazarbayev where he praises his rule and praises his human rights record. But the bottom line is, after they leave, a couple of days later, Frank Giustra gets his uranium concessions, which end up being enormously lucrative to him and to a small group of Canadian mining investors.
His company was like a bit player and really had gone from a worthless shell company overnight, got this huge uranium mining deal. And then soon after that, Bill Clinton got a huge donation, $31 million from Frank Giustra to his charitable foundation, followed by a pledge to donate $100 million more.
So what happened to Giustra's company that benefited from that deal in Kazakhstan?
What happened was Mr. Giustra's company merged with another company called Uranium One, and that was in 2007. Mr. Giustra told us that he, at that point, sold his shares and got out of the business. And the new company, of course, has the Kazakhstan assets that Mr. Giustra acquired, and it also starts to go on a buying spree in the United States.
And then the Russians bought it.
They would acquire would amount to 50% of projected uranium output by 2015.
In other words, Russia took control of what was projected to be up to half of America's uranium. Now, does Secretary Clinton factor into this?
For that deal to go through, it needs federal government approval, and one of those people that has to approve that deal is Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Who, as Senator Clinton, was vigorously opposed to these kind of buys from countries into U.S. property.
That's a great point, Brett. You remember the Dubai Ports deal, for example, which he was opposed to.
We believe that no foreign government should control our ports.
In this particular case, we're talking about uranium. We're talking about things that relate to the nuclear industry. We're talking about the Russian government,
which already provides equipment material to Iran.
That's correct.
It took Schweitzer some digging to figure out how deeply those uranium interests were invested in the Clintons.
Now to that mysterious death in Miami, a federal prosecutor's body found on Hollywood Beach, raising a lot of questions. ABC's Lindsay Davis is here with the latest in the case. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Robin. Branton Wisenant Jr. was working his way up in the legal field. Just a few months ago, he accepted a job working in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami in its major crimes unit. And now his own death is being investigated as a crime.
This morning, police are investigating the death of Miami federal prosecutor and father of 3, Branton Wisenant Jr. The 37-year-old's body was found in the water close to shore on Hollywood Beach in Florida by a civilian walking on the beach early Wednesday morning. Police say he suffered a head wound, possibly caused by a gunshot or another type of trauma. They're currently investigating his death as a crime. Witnesses say he was found fully dressed and that personal effects were found on his body. Wisenant had recently joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in January, working in the Major Crimes Unit. According to court records, he'd been handling several visa and passport fraud cases while also teaching a paralegal program at the University of Miami. The U.S. Attorney's Office tells ABC News, "We will miss him deeply."
So there was head trauma, but we're still waiting for them to release the cause of death. And the FBI, as you would expect, is also investigating here.
Absolutely. All right, Lindsay, thank you.
Thanks. My next guest is investigating the murder of Seth Rich. He says there is some degree of exchange between Rich and Wikileaks that occurred before his death. And joining me now with the latest, the man hired to investigate the case by a third party. Rod Wheeler joins us, former D.C. detective, Fox News contributor. And Rod, good to have you with us. And I know this is a complicated case. I want to say first to the family who have expressed concerns about the evidence here and what it actually means. that we're being very sensitive to this, but we're also looking at this case in the public interest, in fact, in the national interest, to try to discern what the D.C. Metropolitan Police and the FBI have not been able to do to this point. And we're going to do so with every sensitivity that we can bring to their concerns, with every effort also to get ultimately to the truth, which I know the family must desperately seek. Rod, this federal investigator, we're in an unusual situation. An FBI forensic report showing 44,000 emails, 18,000 attachments. That approximates just about what was released by WikiLeaks through the campaign and leading up to the election itself last summer. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Well, no, I actually don't think it's a coincidence, but I do want to emphasize, first off here, Lou, that I have never seen the emails themselves. The information that I have gotten is information that has come through Fox News from that federal investigator, and then what I've done is taken that information to try to corroborate it. Because what we want to do whenever we have a source, as you well know, we always like to check on the credibility of that information coming in.
What have you found in that regard?
Well, what I have found is that his information that he shared with Fox News is pretty consistent with everything else that I've been learning, including the fact that right now no one seems to know where the computers are that belong to Seth Rich. The computers obviously were confiscated at some point. The police department tells me they don't know where they are. The FBI says they're not involved. So my question is, well, who has the computers?
Yeah, who has a computer and why? First, as the primary investigative department, why doesn't the D.C. Metropolitan Police know where evidence is? And if there was a forensic, and there has been a forensic report created by the FBI, why don't the investigating detectives know where it is, what's in those emails, how many there are? We have a very precise number from that federal investigator, but none of this explains why the FBI is involved. And why there are claims that the D.C. detectives were told to stand down.
Right, and that's a claim that I actually heard myself from a detective who said, Rod, we were told not to investigate this fully. Now, see, that's interesting because that's consistent with what this federal investigator said. The federal investigator never knew, Lou, that I had heard from a detective in the police department to stand down. Well, if this guy says the same thing, you have to start saying to yourself, well, maybe there's some truth behind this.
We're not getting these answers, folks. So here I am, putting it all together, just connecting the dots. That's all we're doing. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. You got Heather Podesta on the police board. You got Lisa Countupes and Dr. Jack Sava, who are involved with the Democrats, involved in the hospital, where Seth Rich would have gone. And, of course, it all ties back into Seth Rich, Sean Lucas, and the latest, Barrington Wisenhunt Jr. We're not getting these answers. We deserve these answers. But guess what? We have someone who's also looking for these answers finally involved. He's from Texas.
Right. And part of what was going on and what happened the night that LaVoy Finicum was shot, they were going to a meeting in John Day. It was reported to be several hundred people. One of the reports said about 400 people were waiting there to talk to them about what's going on, what can be done about BLM. So it was not just a standoff that they had going on here. They were educating the people, talking to them about issues, maybe strategizing about what they were going to do. We're going to try to talk to some of the people.
Sure, obviously it wasn't terrorism. The feds have been pushing stealing land. Civil disobedience is a good thing. Overall, the problem is a lot of the locals didn't want them. They didn't have the grazing rights, clearly. The Hammonds had backed off and said they didn't want them. And they were opening it up to be infiltrated by organizations and groups to misrepresent them. They were being set up in a trap. And the Skype is breaking up. We're going to go back to him in a moment. And we're going to finish up with David Knight, then get former Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs' take on the whole situation. And, you know, Joe is really upset that the ADL would dare to claim that he was part of this and helped take it over and stuff. And we showed up, you know, a week into it and covered it and said we thought it was a bad idea. But I explained to Joe, that's just what these liars do. That's why they have no credibility. It's why the government doesn't even use the ADL or Southern Poverty Law Center material anymore at the FBI level officially, because the lawsuits they've lost, the issues with their lying. I mean, they are just real pieces of work. But I just want to be clear. I warned Atari they were infiltrated. They ended up they were. And then our coverage helped the federal judge, come to the point of saying this is staged, letting them out. And then they spun that in the media that I was against all militias. That's what the feds that are inside these groups do. When I warn them, look out, here's the tactics. People see those tactics and they go, don't listen to him, he's a Fed. I'm a Fed like I'm an Easter Bunny jet pilot from Planet X. I am a patriot, purebred Texan, 1776er, committed to freedom. And the fruit of what we've done is absolutely overwhelming. But I mean, it's just absolutely a patriot out in the woods when some guy's in camo telling him, I'm here to protect you, I'm your buddy. People just fall for it every time.
But it goes deeper. And I want to be very clear as I'm getting these new names involved with this investigation.
The U.S. military summer called Operation Jade Helm 15 across 7 states. And with polls showing trust in the government near record lows, that exercise has some Americans feeling uneasy. Jennifer Wishon brings us that story.
Have you heard of this military special operations command exercise called Jade Helm?
Speculation about why the military wants to train in American communities instead of military bases is fueling a growing number of theories across the internet and social media.
The government will take action when it thinks its authority is threatened.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has even asked his National Guard to monitor it. So what is Jade Helm 15? It's realistic military training taking place simultaneously in 7 states, from Southern California to Texas. Over 8 weeks, the nation's elite special forces will practice unconventional warfare by operating outside their normal support systems, adapting to new terrain, and working with civilians to gain their trust. When news of the operation broke, the phones inside Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert's office lit up.
At first, people were not sure what to think. Do we have to worry about martial law? Is our federal government coming in and going to practice imposing martial law on Texas?
A former Army captain, Gohmert says he understands the need for training, yet it bothers him that as part of the exercise, the military is labeling Texas, Utah, and Southern California as hostile.
This is actually taking areas of our home country, the United States, and saying Texas is hostile, Utah is hostile, Southern California is hostile, and we got to take it back from the hostiles. I find that incredibly offensive.
And he thinks it's no coincidence that the Jade Helm 15 map looks an awful lot like the 2012 political map. So-called hostile states are colored red. The suspicion surrounding Jade Helm 15 is fueled by the fact that a vast majority of Americans simply don't trust the government, a level of mistrust that has peaked under the Obama administration, driven by what many believe to be violations of the Constitution and civil liberties. This is what Americans understand war looks like, but Cheryl Chumley, author of Police State USA, says Jade Helm 15 is introducing a new type of warfare, the master of the human domain.
What's going to happen is the special operations soldiers are going to be dressed in civilian clothes, driving civilian vehicles, and they're going to be tasked with striking up rapport with the local citizens.
It's a new strategy to root out terrorists since locals notice odd behavior first. In Jade Helm, citizens are part of the exercise.
Watch out, because that guy that strikes up a conversation with you at the local 7-Eleven, is he a Jade Helm 15 participant? You know, it's a psychological warfare that it kind of messes with your mind a little bit.
White House spokesman Josh Earnest says special forces moving about communities will wear armbands.
I feel confident in expressing to you, without having a lot of detailed knowledge of the particular exercise, is that the civil liberties and constitutional rights of American citizens will be in no way affected by this exercise.
Despite conspiracy theories, Congressman Gohmert isn't worried that the U.S. military is going to issue martial law, but he's not happy with the president.
When my own commander-in-chief, through his subordinates, is just fine with, for games purposes, declaring an enemy of 2 or more of your states, I've got a real problem with that. That is one of the most insensitive, just outrageous things that a military commander could do.
Chumley urges Americans to always stay vigilant when it comes to the government.
What I love most about America is that our rights come from God, not government. And I think we need to hold fast to that principle, because once that's gone, then you just open the doors to more and more government encroachments.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm not saying they've done anything wrong. All I'm doing as an independent journalist and investigator is connecting dots and asking questions. So I just want to go on record that I'm not accusing any of these people of wrongdoing. I'm simply making connections here and asking questions.
In HD, from the station that brings you more West Texas news. News West 9 at 10 starts now.
New at 10 conspiracy theories have now been floating around for weeks about a military operation in West Texas. But what's really happening? Julia Dang went to find out.
Jade Helm 15. That's what the United States Army is calling a large-scale military exercise. Special Operations Command will be training with other armed units beginning in July in 5 states, including Texas.
Jade Helm for July 15, 2015 through September 15, 2015.
After an Army presentation last month, Big Spring officials gave them permission to train within city boundaries.
The community will be aware sometime that they're here, and sometime the community won't be aware. And it'll enhance the ability of them to respond in the future.
Officials couldn't tell us exactly how many
United States Army Special Operations Command Jade Helm from July 15, 2015 through September 15, 2015. We have Mr. Thomas Meade here. If you would come forward, welcome. I think he's come all the way from Edville, North Carolina, to make this happen.
Thank you all very much for having me here this evening. I bring you greetings from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, United States Army Special Operations Command. I just want to be able to thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight to the City Council of Big Spring. This is an honor for us to be here to address you and give you some information on the exercise that we'll be conducting this summer in Howard County. My name's Tom Meade. I'm a retired Special Forces Senior Non-Commissioned Officer. I spent 20 years in the Army and spent 13 with Special Operations. I'm currently a contractor working for United States Army Special Operations Command as an operations planner and an exercise designer for the Jade Helm project. With me this evening I have Master Sergeant Tim Robinson. He's an active duty Green Beret with 3rd Special Forces Group out of Fort Bragg. Tim's helping us design this exercise to get it going, make sure it goes in the right direction. My purpose this evening, is it here? Yes. All right. So my purpose here this evening is we are seeking written invitation and approval from local officials to conduct the realistic military training exercise within the jurisdiction of the city. This means we're out in the public, we're here in your communities. The RMT process was designed by United States Special Operations Command down in Tampa, Florida, by General Votel's staff. General Votel is the commanding general of Special Operations Command, who controls all of the special operators throughout the Department of Defense. But the most important thing is it ensures proper coordination between the Department of Defense and the local entities. Through the process, we're required, as I'm here tonight, is to receive to ask for a letter of invitation from local officials, inviting us into your community to allow us to train our soldiers for the next fight that that they could encounter. We're not training for Afghanistan and Iraq, the things that we've done in the last 15 years. We're looking forward, and we want to make sure that these guys are trained properly. This is where we need the help of the local communities. We coordinate with all the local, state, and federal law enforcement. We've already been and we've coordinated with the police chief here in Big Spring. We've coordinated with Sheriff Parker already. where we have coordinated up at DPS at the state level already. So everybody from a law enforcement aspect understands what the exercise is, and we want to make sure that we are completely plugged in with them to make sure they understand what's going on. We have a public affairs officer who does a complete public affairs review based off of the activities that will occur. We do licensing agreements and memorandums of agreement and memorandums of use with landowners and local governments to allow us to do things on their property. The land use agreements that we do with the local public, we don't just come in to somebody's property, and we won't trespass on somebody's property without the agreement of that landowner. The licensing agreement truly allows us, or it releases liability from the landowner. And we do a full risk assessment and medical plan. We've already linked in with the hospital. We understand how they get the life flight. We also have medical personnel that will be on site to assist should anything happen. What is Jade Helm? Jade Helm is a challenging 8-week exercise. Truly, in this area, in the Martin and Howard County area, we're only going to be here for about 5 to 5.5 weeks. The 8 weeks comes in where it's the preparation and the planning that happens back in Florida and in the Mississippi area. The exercise is a joint military and interagency activity. What this means is we have units from every military service participating in the exercise with us. And we also have some of our interagency partners, such as the FBI, the DEA, and some of the other agencies assisting us and working with us in the exercise. The exercise is unconventional warfare. I'm going to explain that from 2 different angles. Number 1, conventional warfare. Conventional warfare, when you think of that, that is tanks on tanks, uniformed enemy on uniformed enemy, fighting in formation against each other. As you know, we don't normally fight that way. Our country doesn't fight battles. United States Army Special Operations Command, being the director of the exercise, desires to have a very rural area for us to be able to operate in. Because the last few years, these guys have, in Afghanistan and Iraq, they receive aerial resupply by helicopter about once a week. They live in buildings. They have connectivity to the internet to be able to talk to their command, but also to be able to talk to home. When they come out here to Martin and Howard County, they're not going to have those luxuries. In the scenario that we've built, they're going to have to operate outside of those normal support mechanisms and rely on the folks, the civilians that are in the area to be able to support them. We have a backside support element that actually will replicate that, but we also ask for, we can't do the exercise without the public's help. Things that we look for from that perspective is we look for people that are willing to be a role player, to just be someone who goes and gives a little nugget of information for them to build an intelligence picture to understand the scenario better and be able to operate better. We look for people that are willing to transport our guys because they have to move around in a clandestine manner. For example, in the back of a horse trailer in the middle of the night so nobody can see them. These are ways that they have to operate in foreign countries and when they're not supposed to be in those countries. We also look for landowners and business owners who would be willing to allow us to, on a landowner perspective, to be able to use their land, maybe live on their land, or to use a barn or an old barn to be able to conduct a meeting in the middle of the night for them to do planning with a higher command element. Shop owners to be able to use a back storeroom or a warehouse to do these types of meetings as well. But they also have to understand the socioeconomic aspects of areas and what support and how they can support that community as well through their operations. They have to be, they operate in and around communities because that's the way we operate throughout the globe. ordinary citizens are the first ones to notice something that's different. And that, it causes them to have to be that much more careful. The impact on the area. Throughout the exercise, throughout the 7 states, we'll have about 1,200 people that are participating in the exercise from all of DOD and our interagency partners. The footprint that we see here in Martin and Howard County is only about 60 people. Very small footprint. Not a lot of burden on the land. We've had some great Americans that are willing to allow us to use their property already between the 2 counties. And that physical impact is very low. The funding.
At this time, I want to apologize for using somebody else's words in my original video and going off my interpretation of those words. The FBI's released the video. Anybody can go and watch the video and come up with their own conclusions. They can judge everything on themselves. I shouldn't have used somebody else's words. I should have just kept it to what I personally witnessed or what I personally seen. But I did. I used somebody else's words. I used my interpretation of what they were saying. And at this time, anybody can go look at the FBI video and come to their own conclusions, come make their own judgments. There again, I apologize for the people who feel they're misled. I shouldn't have used somebody else's words and recounted the story that way. Thanks.
Very low. The funding that we see, these guys have to eat. We have to supply them. We have to have fuel. I have a backside support that will be driving trucks. I have specialty role players that come in, and I'll have to put them in lodging. We see between the 2 counties about $150,000 that'll be injected into your economy from those type of activities. For example, food. If my team says I need 50 pounds of potatoes, I'm not bringing those potatoes from Fort Bragg. I'm not bringing those from North Carolina. My guys will go to the grocery store, they'll purchase 50 pounds of potatoes, and then they will be appropriately put in an item or in a location to be recovered by the training unit. So we're going to buy those things here. What can you expect? Now understand that this slideshow is our standard slideshow that we use to brief the counties and the cities. Within the cities, you won't see most of this, I would tell you. For example, increased aircraft in the area at night. You'll see that out in the rural area. We have a resupply, an aerial drop that will occur, and then some paratroopers as well will jump into Martin County in early August. It won't happen within the city limits. Noise complaints. If my guys are noisy here in the city, they're really doing something wrong, is what I would tell you. That third bullet, conducting suspicious activities. That's where here in the city, we're looking at using the city from an aspect of conducting clandestine meetings within the city limits. There'll be no kinetic activity. There won't be gunfire going on. There won't be things like that. Our footprints within the cities are probably 5 to 6 people at the most when we do these meetings.
Officials couldn't tell us exactly how many troops and what type of equipment will be sent here, and whether or not they've already arrived. But people involved shouldn't be hard to identify.
They'll all be wearing an armband with a marking that identifies them as part of the exercise.
People here in Big Spring tell us they've seen unusual military activity near the airport during the past few days. We drove around the area today for about an hour, but didn't see any of the tanks or troops viewers have called us about.
If they have a legal reason to, no, it doesn't bother me.
Mark Schaefer doesn't mind military presence in the area, as long as it's not on his property.
If somebody comes through my backyard, I want to know it.
Let's go, boys. Others believe the potential disruption of Jade Helm may be worth it.
It's going to boost local economy as well, because you're going to have thousands of troops here buying groceries, the military is going to be buying fuel in the area.
As for rampant rumors about Jade Helm somehow being behind Walmart closures, well, company, city, and military reps all say there's no connection. Reporting in Midland, Julia Dang, News West 9.
And off in Malheur County continues. There's a newly formed group called the GOHOME campaign, Go Home campaign.
Go Home, yes. It's raising money to help groups that stand in opposition with the militants. Well, so far, the group has raised more than $20,000. And today we're learning more about the campaign and its connection to a judge involved in the Dwight and Steve Hammond case. That inspired the standoff in the first place. Brent Weisberg has more.
Over the weekend, KOIN 6 News first told you about the Go Home campaign. We interviewed the co-founder, Zach Klinowski. The pledge drive has been up for 24 hours and has 550 contributors so far with $23,000 raised.
We're getting to that point where the longer the occupiers stay, the more they're going to fund gun reform. They're going to fund organizations that work to stomp out hate and bigotry. They're going to fund the Paiute Native American tribe whose land the refuge actually sits on.
But now we're learning more about Klinowski's background. He confirms to us that his mother is Chief U.S. District Judge Ann Aiken. She's the judge who re-sentenced Dwight and Steve Hammond to 5 years in prison with credit for time already served. The two have been convicted of arson. By law, arson on federal land carries a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. The trial court that did the first sentencing handed down a prison term that the government says was well below what the law required. Not only is Klinowski Judge Aiken's son, he also works for the city of Portland and is the special assistant to Mayor Charlie Hales. He tells us he's slowly transitioning out of that role. Klinowski says there's no conflict between the Go Home campaign and his mother, who he says just found out about his efforts this weekend.
She's not involved in any way. This was something that my brother Jake and I came up with.
Grid. But first, the Nevada ranch standoff where the feds have been battling local rancher Cliven Bundy in a struggle between a cattle rancher and the federal government. For more than a century, the Bundy family's cattle have grazed in the Nevada desert, earning them land use rights on public lands. But a federal judge has ordered them to pay grazing fees. This week, 200 armed federal agents surrounded Bundy's ranch and began deporting his cattle. They tased his son. They knocked down his sister, ostensibly to protect desert tortoise. The Bureau of Land Management, though, wasn't created until half a century after the Bundy family cattle started grazing there. A confrontation was ginned up this week as cattle ranchers, farmers, and self-described militia groups supporting Bundy swarmed the area. The protesters were then threatened by heavily armed federal agents. Joining me now, William LaJeunesse, who's live from Nevada. William, big developments today. Tell us what happened.
Well, you know, Judge, this is not the result many of us expected. As of last night with a conference call with the BLM, they were going strong. They were seizing his cattle, about 400. They had knocked down corrals, knocked down fences, taken out water tanks. And then this morning at 9 a.m., as people gathered behind me, the BLM abruptly said it was stopping operations. It was pulling out. That was unexpected. They said they were doing that for the safety of their own employees as well as the public. Because, of course, you mentioned those confrontations earlier in the week. And, of course, we had a lot of armed militia out here. And they said basically they were backing off. But there's one thing they didn't do. They didn't offer to give Clive Bundy back his cattle. And he stood there at 9 a.m. right after that, and he said, listen, I'm going to give them 1 hour, and if they don't give me back my cattle, we're going to go down to that corral and we're going to get them. And that's exactly what they did. And there was this huge confrontation on Interstate 15. 200 to 300 protesters stopping traffic southbound, and then the highway patrol shows up, local police show up, and there is literally a confrontation. I will say an armed confrontation, because some in law enforcement had their guns out, and some on the private militia, or rather the citizens militia, if you will, they had their guns out as well. We have pictures of guys in a sniper position looking through their sights.
Well,
I'm not making it up, okay?
You know, William, it seems that both sides were heavily armed. And, you know, for the feds to back off what they originally said, and I'm going to read a statement that they issued today. They say, today we announce the decision to conclude the cattle gather because of our grave concern about the safety of employees and members of the public. And they talk about safety being their #1 priority and escalating tensions. But, you know, William, I have to ask you a more direct question. Do you think, William, that the feds blinked here?
What I believe is they miscalculated and misjudged the response that was going to come down. So some of the protesters went to get the cattle out. They were rebuffed, and the negotiation was taking place. And indeed, the BLM released the cattle, again saying for public safety reasons. And then the cattle showed up down at the river about 30 minutes later, all real happy. So blinked, I'm not sure. They probably did it, and it was probably a very prudent decision on their behalf that they did.
Right, and you can see the cows coming home there on our screen, William. But reports are that some of the cattle actually died. Is that true?
I don't know that for a fact. I know that I got that secondhand, that, you know, when you're being herded up, and I think you're going to talk to Scott momentarily, he is a rancher, that when you have helicopters rounding up cattle during calving season and separating the females from the children, if you will, that it can be rather stressful on them. And I was told that some died, but I'm not personally aware of that.
Yeah, interesting. So, you say the females and the children, but let me try to get to what the core of this is. Is this really about tortoises, William?
Well, I tell you what I think it is for a lot of the people here. Whether these are a lot of rural people, and they have a lot of things in common, and I think they see their livelihood and their lifestyle threatened or under assault, and some blame an overbearing federal government. So whether you're in the timber industry and the federal government been closing roads, you're in farming and you're worried about your pesticides and you can't use GMO. You know, in your ranching and they got to say the cattle is going to hurt the Delhi sandfly or the pygmy owl or something like that. And so they have these things in common. At least that's one of the things I heard doing interviews today. Well,
but you know, it's kind of curious because in 1991, that same Bureau of Land Management, William, called for euthanizing the tortoises. And it seems kind of hypocritical that the same Bureau would now claim to protect them when they were resolved not that long ago to kill them. But let me move on from that. Did they really have a corral for the protesters where they had to stand?
Yeah, there were the BLM, and they took this down within 24 hours because people laughed at them, and they actually put up signs saying the First Amendment is not an area, if you will. But they had like a 30 by 30 area with the kind of orange crime tape around it, and said, this is your area where you're going to speak. And of course, these people totally ignored it. And after 24 hours, even the governor said that's laughable, and they pulled it.
All right, William, thanks so much.
The test is just beginning, but we will not stop. We will not back down. We will not be deterred. Make it known clearly. These buildings are very symbolic. They're a bunch of rock buildings 35 miles away from nowhere, but they're symbolic. We're holding this. It's been the federal government's fortress, their castle, and we're holding it. We shall not give it up to them ever. It returns to Harney County when it goes back. The purpose of this is to return the resources of this land or this county back to the county, to the citizens of this state, and to this county in particular. And you need to look at this constitutionally. The federal government has no authority to own and control 1/3 of America's landmass. See, I'm a rancher down there in Mojave County. They control 90% of the land down there. And they have combined all three branches of power into one: legislative, executive, and judicial. And none of these people are accountable to us, the citizens there. They're not under the power of recall. And so they violate the letter and the intent of the Constitution by combining all three branches of power without representation. See, Harney County used to be the wealthiest county here in the state of Oregon. And now it is the poorest because the resources of Harney County have been seized by the federal government. We're here to allow the citizens of Harney County to reclaim their control of the resources of their county that they might once again farm, ranch from all these ranches. There was more than 100 ranchers out here that have been forced off.
I understood that what was happening to them and what was happening to the people of Harney County was a type and a shadow of what was going to happen to all people across this country if we did not stand. That was the second thing I understood. And the third, I gotta think here a little bit, but the third piece was that this was very clear. The third piece was that if the people allowed these things to continue to the Hammonds, that he would hold them accountable. And then he shared with me something else that has actually came true, and I didn't understand it at the time. But he told me that I was supposed to go to the Hammonds, and I was supposed to find out some things. But he also helped me to understand, and I'm not saying that I'm getting a voice or anything. Don't get me wrong; it was an understanding. But he helped me understand that through this process, the Hammonds would eventually not allow you to help them any longer. Okay? And I found that out. I tell you those things because I want you to understand that I know without doubt that this is the issue, this is the time, and you are the people. And it is now that we must stand. And if we do, and we do it right, we do not have to do it with bloodshed. We do not have to do it with anything but honor. But if we do it right, we can restore the Constitution back to this county, and it can be an example for all the other counties across this nation. And I'm telling you, I know with everything that's inside of me that the time is now, this is the place, and you are the people.
So let's go to the Fernwood document.
Well, Fernwood Foundation is an entity in Canada controlled by Ian Telfer, who ends up being the chairman of Uranium One, which is the Russian-owned uranium company. Ian Telfer, in 2007, made an individual contribution to the Clinton Foundation. They did disclose that. The problem is, based on Canadian tax records, in this particular case, made a payment of $250,000 to the Clinton-Juster Sustainable Growth Initiative. They are required to disclose the donation. They failed to do that. This is a hidden contribution. And over the course of a couple of years, you're talking about more than $2 million from the Fernwood Foundation to the Clinton Foundation. When you actually go to the Clinton Foundation website itself on disclosures and type in Fernwood, you find no contributions listed whatsoever.
When Mrs. Clinton became Secretary of State, she signed a memorandum of understanding with the Obama White House because they understood that having a Secretary of State whose husband is collecting money from various foreign interests could potentially pose conflicts of interest. And so they laid down certain rules. They said you can't take money from a foreign government. And they also required that the Clintons make all of their donors to their family foundation public. And contrary to the agreement that they had with the White House, those donations were never made public.
Ian Telfer told the New York Times that he made the donations based on his wish to personally support Mr. Juster in his charitable work, not based on any relationship to the Clintons. He also said that he never spoke to either President Clinton or then Secretary Clinton about his company, Uranium One. Frank Juster has said, quote, "The New York Times story presents no evidence of wrongdoing or impropriety, but rather is replete with innuendo and irresponsible, unfounded speculation." The Clinton campaign had this to say about both Schweitzer and the New York Times reporting. Clinton campaign spokesman Brian Fallon said, quote, "Hillary Clinton herself did not participate in the review or direct the department to take any position on the sale of Uranium-1.
The campaign said typically these kinds of decisions don't go all the way up to the secretary and instead are decided at the assistant secretary level. And they produced an assistant secretary to say that she had never intervened on any case that he was involved in. But what they didn't say or couldn't answer is, was she briefed? Before this decision was made? They didn't say.
Fallon also says, quote, without presenting any direct evidence in support of the claim, the Times story, like the book on which it is based, wrongly suggests that Hillary Clinton's State Department pushed for the sale's approval to reward donors who had a financial interest in the deal.
Our story doesn't say that. Our story is about how some of the biggest donors to Bill Clinton's foundation built, financed, and eventually sold off to the Russians a company that held huge stakes in Kazakhstan and known American uranium reserves. While she was Secretary of State, the chairman of that company made undisclosed donations during that same time frame. She was part of a process that reviews deals like this, where you have a strategic asset and implications for national security.
Lisa Countupes. Now, I might be pronouncing this name wrong. It's really unimportant. Lisa Countupes is, I quote this story from The Hill, she's a leading lobbyist. In fact, she was considered a top lobbyist. Guys, if you scroll down, you can find Lisa down the page there. She's pretty far down. This is a list of all the top lobbyists in 2016. Lisa Countupes, a Clinton administration veteran. Countupes has been working on everything from drug approval reform to cyber security. Cyber security, DNC leaks, Seth Rich, Wikileaks, hacking, Lisa Countupes, and again, a Clinton administrative veteran. So why do I bring her up? Well, Lisa Countupes, again, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, apparently, and this is stuff where I'm not an expert at, but I'm just reporting what I found, apparently she was on the Energy and Commerce Committee during the Uranium-1 deal that Hillary Clinton's State Department made while she was in the State Department. And here is the disclosure form that shows that Lisa Countupes was part of that transaction. So again, I'm sure that this is just another coincidence, but let's move on. Do you guys have this flyer for Katie McGinty here? Please join co-host Lisa Countupes, John Podesta, Tony Podesta for Katie McGinty. Again, I'm not saying Katie McGinty did anything wrong or Lisa did anything wrong, but now what we have is Lisa Countupes lobbying for Katie McGinty with John Podesta, with Tony Podesta. They can be found on a lot. Yeah, there you go, guys. Lisa Countupes, John Podesta, Tony Podesta can be found lobbying for people all the time. Again, this is just one example here with Katie McGinty. Another thing we have is the Podestas and Lisa Countupes on all sorts of travel lists with the Clintons. And this is where it gets even weirder. Included with Lisa Countupes on these lists for parties, for Democrat events, on these travel lists with the Clintons is her, I guess, her spouse, I really don't know this, but is in a known relationship with Dr. Jack Sava. Again, I'm not implying that anything is being done wrong by these people, but you have to wonder, Dr. Jack Sava is, this is fact, he is the MD who is in charge of trauma surgery at MedStar Health, which is where Seth Rich would have been sent to receive surgery. So again, I'm sure that this is just a coincidence that these people have these connections, but these are the questions we need answered. Why are we not getting the footage from all the cameras at the scene where Seth Rich was killed? Why are we not getting interviews with the people that run the bar and the people who were at the bar the night Seth Rich was killed? Nothing on that. Why don't we get the footage from the police chest cams that they had on that night? Nothing on that. And then the big matzo ball that is sitting out there now, and I'm just asking Dr. Jack Sava, maybe you can help. Why don't we get the records from the night Seth Rich entered the hospital? We need to know what hospital he went to and who provided care to him. But we're not getting those answers, are we? And that is the biggest smoke of them all, folks.
Here's the plan in broad terms. Broad terms is that those transactions which took place, which transferred these assets, these real estates, these resources to the federal government, at that point, those transactions are where we need to focus on, because that is the illegal transaction. Remember, the federal government can only purchase lands by how? Look in the Constitution, by the consent of your state legislature. Unless there is a bill of sale from the state legislature transferring that land to the federal government, it is an illegal transaction. So that is the point that we are beginning to look at through the records. And that point, that is the plan. As we go to the records, we find that transaction. That's where we begin to unwind it. The first people that we will protect is the ranchers, the farmers that are currently on their land, that they are not to be intimidated anymore, to pushed off. All these ranchers that have come and visited with me, that have talked with me, with all of us here, the one common thing, the one thing in common is this: they express fear that the federal government will do to them what has been done to the Hammond family. So that is the first thing that we'll do, is to protect any rancher, any farmer from having happened to them what has happened to the Hammond family, so that they may speak out and feel free, that they may express their feelings, their opinions without intimidation. That's the first point. The second point is when that transaction is found, we'll begin to reestablish the ownership to that family who lost it through various means. And we will see that we are being successful and being prepared to leave when the 100 ranches and the farms are being restored to these families. They're moving their cattle back onto their ranches. The logger is back into the hill, and they're safe in the use of their resources. When Harney County residents are safe in the use of their resources, when Oregon, the state of Oregon, is safe from the threat and intimidation of a central power. You know, I need to get home. I got cows that are scattered and lost, and I'll be looking forward to that. But that is the broad plan, and we're working on the specifics with teams and groups. Again, I will be as gentle as possible, firm as necessary. That's what I always say.
And we hope that we can restore those things, and that we can unite as a people in protecting individuals, that we will not forget about how important each person is.
And this morning, Finnegan is dead. Sarah Seidner is in Burns, Oregon, following the story. Good morning.
Oregon contrasted with attention.
Good morning. That's right. Lavoy Finnegan had those words to say about not pointing guns at each other, but he also told us that when he was sitting in front of this Malheur Wildlife Refuge, that he would not be arrested, not alive anyway. And so those were words from him about a couple of weeks ago. He's been very adamant that he wants to stay here until, as he says it, justice was served. He is now deceased. We do not have details from the Oregon State Police or the FBI as to exactly how that went went down, whether shots were fired from both sides or how he ended up shot. There was another person shot. Apparently, Ammon Bundy's brother, Ryan Bundy, had been shot in the arm. We've heard those details, some of them.
So, again, this is Jason Patrick with the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps, and I'm here on the road in front of Burns, in front of the Harney County Resource Center, and there's news here. This is Channel 6 from Oregon, and this is CNN. And who are you with?
KGW Portland.
KGW Portland. And I don't know, there's about 9 or 10 press vehicles here right now, and my stream health is climbing and falling. But I mean, that's what's going on right here on the public road in and out from Burns, and that's what's going on behind them. So everybody's reporting right now from the public road here in Burns, and you know, my good friend is deceased. That's frustrating. I expect there be something said at a news conference, and there ought to be audio and videotape of it according to Oregon state law of stops. So I think that tape should be released right now in the interest of transparency and peaceful resolutions. But right now, you know, I'm still right here in Oregon, here with the press corps that's here, that has come from Burns out this direction. There's another presser over here. So I don't know if they're going live, but that's who y'all with? K2 News over here. So that's what's going on here right now. I still hear the words peaceful resolution, even though I have a friend who's been killed.
From the Bundy's father. His father talked to one of our sister stations and explained what he said Ammon Bundy told him about the shooting.
He said that there was like 5 of them had been arrested. My son Ryan had been shot in the arm. Little boy Finnegan, they cold-blooded killed him. He said he was out, had his hands in the air. Said he wasn't armed. He wasn't any threats, and they cold-blooded just killed him. They shot him several times, I guess. But anyway, my son said that's what happened.
Now, that is their version of the story. We have not heard the Oregon police or the FBI's version of how one person ended up shot and killed. What we do know at this point is we were able to get into the refuge area before they ended up putting up stop points, checkpoints, not letting people in and out unless, of course, you are a resident or a rancher in the area. What we can tell you right now is we don't see any police or FBI agents around where we are, but we do see this huge tractor here that the guys who have been and are still inside the headquarters here, still taking over those headquarters, they have put that there in place to try and create their own barricade to try, I suppose, and stop any further pushback from the FBI or the Oregon State Police. They're saying that they have decided to stay, but we don't know how many people are still there. We do know at least 8 people, one person who is all the way in Arizona, have been arrested in this case. Carol?
All right, Sarah Seidner reporting live from Oregon this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see you this morning. This is intended to be a peaceful occupation, if so be, if you want to use those words. This is intended to be peaceful. We want all people to be safe. We want all law enforcement lives to be safe. We want our lives to be safe. We want you to know the only reason the only reason that we have guns here is for our own personal protection and safety. We should never, ever point guns at each other. So let's make sure that that is the understood thing. No pointing guns at each other. And tomorrow we'll be releasing what we have done, the things that have happened, the things that we are going to do. Things are really, there is a lot that is happening, things that you need to know, and tomorrow we will give that to you. And I really appreciate you being here, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Raymond Bundy admits defeat, calls on remaining Oregon occupiers to stand down and go home. And sure enough, the so-called militia guys that were his security haven't been arrested, got let go, and were the folks that would run up to us and say, "Get out of here, you say the Bundys are feds." We would go, Joe Biggs would go, "We didn't say you were feds. We said watch out for federal infiltrators, they always do it, and they'll come in and tell everybody that Alex says that they're feds, so they don't talk to us, so we can't try to protect them." And they were successful. They did that. They speak to ego. The feds show up and go, "Sir, I'm here to protect you. You are the new George Washington. I'm going to be your right-hand man." And then it comes out that they're informants or they're connected to the government or they've been threatened to do it. And I'm not saying who's who or who's what or naming names. I'm just saying a couple folks got the word that day and disappeared. Other people got picked up and then released. And I mean, look, at infiltrations, they'll do fake arrests. They'll do fake indictments. They've even done fake executions before and released people. That's been admitted. So folks that don't know what the government, especially the U.S. government, does to infiltrate, quote, organized crime or paramilitary groups or narcotics groups, you just don't ever read the newspaper then. And the weird thing is they'll use the same operatives over and over again burning people, and they've got a playbook where they go up and speak to the ego of the people that mean well and then get full control of them and then say, "I'm now in charge of all media, you know, going through this group." And then it's over. It's over. You are controlled from the beginning. And I've seen them do it with all these Muslim groups and radical leftist groups too, where they'll get in, take them over, and then lead them into crimes or lead them right into ambushes. And I've never seen anything like it. And as soon as the people are all locked up and going to prison, I get letters going, "I'm sorry, you were right. I wish I would have listened." I'm really sad for you. The feds are going to have major meetings on this. They're going to have all their hidden footage. They're going to teach classes on it to send out whole groups of people on how to do this over and over again. This is a big victory for the globalist. And it's very, very sad.
But one of the most important things, and I know I've said it previously, is we link in with the law enforcement officers. They know when and where we're conducting activity. That way we actually invite the police department to be near the activity. That way they're able to answer constituent calls on that. The other thing that we do is we brief that prior to the activity going on. That way the police chief can let the dispatch know that this is occurring, so that when they field phone calls from concerned citizens, they're able to meet that off or cut that off at the pass, so to say. And the other thing that we do as well is we make sure that it tries to get out at the morning and evening roll call, so the officers that are on duty know what's going on and know where it's occurring. One of the things that we do as well, they will be carrying weapons, but it won't be live ammunition. It'll all be blank ammunition. Just to correct one thing that was in the newspaper on Sunday that I read was they'll have blank ammunition, but there will not be any explosions. We won't be setting off live demolition out here. The guys will be wearing civilian attire or a mixed uniform. They may be wearing fatigue bottoms and a t-shirt, but not normally anything that's out of the ordinary in West Texas from what I've seen, especially during hunting season. And they may be driving civilian vehicles throughout the area. So really, within the city limits, if you notice my guys, they're probably really doing something wrong. Safety measures. One of the most important things, the #1 priority for United States Army Special Operations Command is the safety of our civilians.
This facility right here, this white tent behind me, this is our medical triage center. I was fortunate enough, our team is fortunate enough to have 2 medics on board. Both are trauma medics. One's
daily communication between law enforcement and Department of Defense. Anytime we're conducting activity in your jurisdiction, we will make sure that we coordinate. We have medics. Each Special Forces detachment has 2 Special Forces medics that are trained to a very high trauma level that will be with each element. We will also have a support element that will have a senior non-commissioned officer, Special Forces medic, who is responsible for the evac and anything that those 2 medics cannot handle. He'll be the one that will be directly interfacing with the hospitals throughout the area. We coordinate with the life flight. In fact, I was able to sit down with Jonetta Sweat this afternoon and get some information based off of the hospital and the life flight to be able to pass on to our medical planners. Clear marking of the participants. That, for us, that's one of the big things. We make sure that all of our guys have some type of marking that they'll all be wearing an armband with a marking that identifies them as part of the exercise. And if we have role players, for example, a landowner or a business owner who is participating in the exercise, we'll ensure that they have marking as well, that they're part of the exercise. Because there are times where we ask at times the law enforcement folks to do a traffic stop for us, to check our guys, to see why they're doing what they're doing, when they're doing it, and why they're doing it. Because the police, I know I've been questioned by the police, and they know how to make you squirm. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that the officers, should they decide to participate, we'll make sure that they are marked as well. That way the detachments and the members know how to react properly. If that officer conducts a traffic stop and he's not wearing one of those armbands, it is a true traffic stop. They want to make sure that they act appropriately for that traffic stop. We also do coordination with local residents. So if and what I mean by that is, just as we do with the law enforcement, if there's activity occurring around an area, we will actually go out to doors and knock on doors, introduce ourselves, and let them know that there'll be activity happening between this time and this time. That way they're not caught off guard. That should help lessen the calls of the constituents to the law enforcement as well. We do fire condition review. That's really for our rural environments aspect. And our public affairs office as well does public announcements. For example, in North Carolina, for another exercise, they do newspaper ads announcing the exercise. They do radio spots, and they also get with the local television stations, and they do a small, short announcement on the television to allow to get the widest dissemination that the activity or the exercise is occurring. At this time, if you have any questions or concerns, I'm willing to answer those.
Mr. Ward, you have any questions?
Yes, sir. First, Mr. Meade and Master Sergeant Rawson, I want to thank you for your service to our country. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
I was just had a couple of questions, and you've already started talking to the landowners and
yes, sir.
Setting things up. I just have to ask, how does FBI and DEA work with the military on an operation like this?
Well, generally speaking, sir, the FBI and DEA provide us liaison officers up at our command level, depending on how the scenario is written. One of the ways the FBI and DEA are working with us here is in Arizona. They will actually do some questioning for us at one of the airports in Arizona.
Okay. And do y'all use any personnel from NATO, UN, or
no, sir,
DHS?
Not currently for Jade Helm. It is U.S. only. We that has been one of the discussions that I'm not sure if it has occurred yet, but.
Okay. Ms. Harvard.
Yes, I have one question, and I'm not sure how to ask it, but does your training also include like drug cartel type?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Just okay.
It is a military scenario. We're not putting the drug cartel aspects into it for Jade Helm 15. That may change. I'm not a scenario writer, so I don't tell them what to write. They tell me what they've written. So.
If I'll break an ankle on the ice, you know, or God forbid something much worse, whatever medical assistance they have there, I understand they have one Army 11 Bravo combat medic who can help out. At least he can. Army 11 Bravo combat medic who can help out. At least he can get them stabilized enough to where it's something more serious. We can get them here and then get them home.
Sometimes it takes a while. Recognition is seldom fast. There are many inches in a mile. Always been built to last. Sometimes it takes a while. Recognition is seldom fast. There are many inches in a mile. True music has always been built to last. Sometimes it takes a while. recognition is seldom fast. There are many inches in a mile.
Thinking it's all over with, and now they're being ordered to come back and finish out up to 5 years.
Way demonizing you right now.
You're not what you portray to be.
Yeah, I am actually. What have I committed a crime? Have I done anything, any harm to anybody?
No, it's your attitude. You're portraying. We're here for a peaceful thing.
We are. You're trying to blank.
1 second, please. We're all really vocal right now.
My dear friends, I come to you in mostly response to Stuart Rhodes' message, again, stand down.
After the meeting, I told the sheriff I wanted to speak with him privately, and I also told Ammon, because the Pacific Patriots guys, all of those, Ammon and I walked out, and the other people who were the historian and who weren't involved with the PPN, we walked out and we were talking outside, and all of the PPN people, they stayed in and were talking to the sheriff for another half hour or so. I told Ammon at that time that I guarantee you right now, because Ammon's been very, very worried about division amongst the people who are going to lend support. And I promised him that I would make sure that none of that was apparent.
Jacklets because they want to steal our land and our resources and keep us under their thumb. So his name's Joseph Rice, correct?
Joseph Rice.
If you guys do not hear anything from anybody but Joseph Rice, he is the contact. He's the only the only person you guys listen to. If anybody else has anything different, it's not true. Don't listen to him. We've already talked to him. He's our contact. We already told him we're on our way. We got security teams on their way. We even got some heavy hitters on their way. We won't tell you who because we got OSPAC. So anyway, you guys, this is Blaine Cooper. Make sure this video gets out. We are standing off with the BLM in Oregon, Grants, Oregon, over a gold mine. Can't let the Chinese or the government have the gold. It belongs to the people. All right, guys, Blaine Cooper, I'm out.
That's the federal government's line and the Oath Keepers Pacific Patriots Network line is exactly the same. And that they're trying to insert themselves as in a total control manner to keep everybody out, and it's very much obvious that they want to control the narrative. They said we have media resources that nobody else has. We have information gathering resources that nobody else has. And we will control the narrative with the media. They wanted to assert over and over again that they would control the narrative with the media, and that the media would have to put out the right things because we're going to give them the information to put out, and they won't be allowed to put out anything but the correct information. So there was a ridiculous statement on its face.
Album on hold, whole world on hold. The crowd is like hold, operators like hold. Please hold. Man, now ain't that cold? I'm just trying to talk to my homie that's up in the hole. And homegirl not trying to be a hoe, even though she on the pole. Can she get a second chance? No. Whoa, like the opposite of gold. That ain't how it's supposed to be. Or butterfly. But for the sake of rhyming, let's just say butterfly, yeah. The truth stings like Muhammad Ali. I tell him, don't homicide me. I'm just a little old hope with his back against the ropes, fighting for his fans and fighting for his folks. But the boos from the crowd can become so loud. If I can block them out, then I can knock them out and dance around the ring. But until then, I'll...
I'm a former PsyOps, cross-trained by JFK PsyOps Psychological Warfare Center. I'm a former PsyOps, cross-trained by JFK PsyOps Psychological Warfare Center.
And in order to support that, they find behaviors of the local populace that they can change to best accomplish that mission.
Special Operations soldiers deploy worldwide on missions that range in size and scope from the tactical up to the strategic level. Smaller tactical or battlefield level operations are used to secure immediate or short-term goals. Strategic level operations encompass broad national security objectives during both peacetime and war. Typically, PsyOps soldiers deploy in small teams of 3 to 12 soldiers with an average mission length of less than a year. PsyOps soldiers may be employed in operations which support conventional forces, unconventional warfare, or counterinsurgency techniques, and in conducting raids, peacekeeping operations, evacuations, and rescue missions. When deploying, you may also assist other government agencies in support of foreign governments, humanitarian assistance, and drug interdiction.
I was briefing a Minister of Security with what I thought was the best method for that host nation to better the image of the police force at that time. That was the example.
PsyOps soldiers can also operate as a force multiplier, meaning they increase the operational capabilities of the military organizations they are supporting. This requires PsyOps soldiers to be versatile, agile leaders in top physical condition who are tactically and technically proficient with strong intellectual and communication skills.
Be prepared for a very diverse mission.
Okay, get them and let's go. Let's go unload this shit. I got a lot of shit for you, and I got entertainment.
Hey guys, what's up? Lane Cooper. It's snowing like a bitch out here. We're getting ready to head up, and we're going to go and see what we can do about getting our Marine Skylar out of the federal prison. Who was kidnapped and imprisoned illegally with the Second Amendment of the Constitution being violated. And John Rentheimer is going to be there, I'm going to be there, and many others. So come out and join us at the federal courthouse there in Seattle, Washington, and make our voices heard. And it's time that we start taking a stand, being bold. Too much of our country has been sold off, and it's time that we make our voices heard. They're not going to stop until you guys get off that couch and make a stand and have your voices heard, and to be bold and get in there and say, we've had enough. They will take everything from you. That's just how it is. This is Blaine Cooper. Hope to see you guys there tomorrow, Monday, Federal Courthouse, Seattle, Washington. Free our Marine. I'm out.
Well, good evening, everybody. How you doing? This is Mark Connors on American Media News. The Connors Report coming to you from Burbank Studios in Los Angeles, California. Okay, guys, we're going to play our second highlight clip of the day. I'd like for you to pay attention to the date that this particular video is published. It was published on January 19th, 2016. And then I want you to pay attention to the dates of when the FBI started setting up their camp. Let me play you this here real quick.
Ladies and gentlemen, with Gary Underhill, and formally and officially with Oath Keepers, right now you guys have got a camp set up. It's approximately 6 miles from...
Formally and officially with Oath Keepers. Where are the Oath Keepers?
The refuge. Give us a tour of the camp. Tell us what your objective is, your mission objective is here.
Sure. Well, we got.
Why aren't the Oath Keepers here?
We've got 2 sets of living quarters, one here, and Mel Bundy was gracious enough to bring this toy hauler out here last night. That way, you know, our guys aren't necessarily having to sleep in the cold. And
oh, that's great.
Yeah, cold and the wet, the snow. It was pretty bad last night. What we did is we came out, and this facility right here, this white tent behind me, this is our medical triage center. I was fortunate enough, our team is fortunate enough to have 2 medics on board. Both are trauma medics. One's a former Navy corpsman from Gitmo. The other is a combat experienced Army combat medic with also got some private contractor experience behind him.
Oh, that's great. So we're setting up a triage center. Why are we doing that?
Organization in our region that has 2 certified trauma medics on board.
Wow, outstanding.
Trauma medics, why?
We saw what was going on out here, and like I said, we've been organizing since early last summer. And I've been watching very closely what's been going on. Our team and I have been discussing it monthly, kind of waiting to see how it develops, whether it's something we need to be involved in or not. And I've been conversing with Joe Captain O, for quite some time, and we finally decided to, for lack of a better term, pull the trigger on it and pack up and come out. So we got very short notice. We got 7 guys to come out here. My 2 medics have since had to leave. Unfortunately, they've got hospital jobs back in town in Reno they couldn't get away from.
Right.
But they were able to come out. They got us set up. Right now, we're in the process of developing some communication between the refuge and here, programming the radios so we're on the same comms, so that if something happens down there, whether it's something as simple as someone breaking an ankle on the ice, or God forbid something much worse, whatever medical assistance they have there, I understand they have 1 Army 11 Bravo combat medic that can help out. At least he can get them stabilized enough to where it's something more serious. We can get them here, and then get them hopefully to somewhere where they can be treated even further.
That's great. And tell us about your Oath Keepers organization in Northern Nevada, is that correct?
We're out of Reno, Northern Nevada Oath Keepers.
Okay.
We started developing and organizing early this past summer. And we've got a group of, I got to tell you, I've got a team of about 24 guys, and they are all highly trained, highly motivated, very professional individuals. We're all believers, which is, first and foremost, very important to us.
Excellent. So we have a triage center.
I could not be prouder of the young men and women that I have in our organization.
That's awesome.
You were telling me a little bit about your background. You've got your former retired law enforcement.
I am. I spent 26 years as a police officer. I started my career at the Phoenix Police Department, ended up retiring in 2012 from the Carson City Sheriff's Office after I came back from Iraq in 2010.
Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you so much. Okay, so basically we've got an emergency medical triage center set up by and for patriots in Burns, Oregon. And that is a Pete Santilli live feed that we are using to show you guys what's going on out there in the world. And what we're going to do throughout these clips is we're going to look at several different angles of this thing. We're going to look at several different. We're going to go deep inside to people, and we're going to talk about what's going on. We're going to bring you both sides, both sides of opinions, different outlooks, different approaches from different sources. And you know what, my friends, it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not you believe certain things, trust certain things, want to be involved with certain things, want to support certain things. Now, one thing, though, I want to bring to your attention, my friends, there's a lot of people that are not there. There's a lot of people that are not involved in this thing, and I want to know why not. Why are they not, where are the Oath Keepers? Where is InfoWars? Now, InfoWars, you would think that, Biggs would be out here a couple of times. They'd have somebody out here a couple of times, something like that, right? You'd think so. But they're not here. Where's all the big press that was at the the Bundy situation out there at the Bundy Ranch in Nevada? They're not there. Why not? What the hell's going on here? Well, we're going to check all that stuff out on our today's highlights. You're going to be able to catch that every night right here on the Connors Report. Today's highlights coming to you from Burns, Oregon, January 26, 2016. We'll be right back.
Well, maybe there's some truth behind this. So that's why I think when you look at the totality of everything that we have right now, it's very consistent with what this federal investigator has said. Now, I don't think that the police department has intentionally covered up anything pertaining to this case. I think it comes from someone above the police department. That's just my sense, Lou.
And we should point out the mayor herself denying that she issued any kind of stand-down order as described, obviously, by some of those within the department. But again, we don't have an explanation why Washington, D.C. seems to be where investigations go to die, whether they originate with the federal government or the D.C. Metropolitan Police. This is a strange, again, unresolved investigation with obvious frustration on the part of the local detectives who have this case in their hands, as well as the federal authorities, again, without explanation about why federal authorities are involved here.
That's right. And no one has been able to give us any adequate explanation as to why the feds would be involved. I think the feds are involved, and I think there's a lot more information that's going to come out with regards to this case. But I do want to say that the Rich family is very concerned about this. The Rich family believes it was still a botched street robbery, which it could have been. So I want to make sure that that's clear. We don't know who or why Seth ended up dead.
We haven't been able to determine, perhaps you have, that there were any murders in that neighborhood at all in recent years. So
the last murder occurred in 2010, Lou. Right. 2010.
So this is quite an exception, particularly in a city that is broadly as violent as Washington and deadly as Washington, D.C. is. And there seems to be a quick reflex here to say, this was it was a robbery on the part of the police department. Obviously, it was not, because nothing was taken from Seth Rich. He was alive for 2 hours. We have no record that a single police officer or detective asked him, who shot you? It is a peculiar case from start to finish. Your thoughts as we wrap up here about where we're headed now.
Right, just to go along with that real quickly, we also don't have body cameras that I know the police officers were wearing on the scene the night in which Seth was killed. That's a problem, because we know for a fact those officers had on body cameras. No one knows where the video is. I think we're going to have to continue to look at this case, and hopefully more will come out as the days go by, Lou.
Rod Wheeler, thank you for being with us. We appreciate your time and your thoughts about this case that disturbs the entire country.
Back with a Fox News alert, a brand new bombshell in the murder of that guy right there, a DNC staffer. An investigator now says Seth Rich was in contact with Wikileaks.
I've got another confession to make. I'm your fool. Everyone's got the chains to break, holding you. Were you born to resist? Don't be abused. Is someone getting the best, the best, the best, the best of you? Is someone getting the best, the best,
for.
Steve, we got a bogey. Short range ballistic thermal payload. Stop it! Go.
On an island in the sun, we'll be playing and having fun, and it makes me feel so fun.
Sounded really rough then. Okay, well, glad to give you good luck.
We'll run away together. We'll spend some time forever. We'll never feel bad anymore.
Find out what the ghost wants. Let's get this ghost. Take.
Step on his back.